I'll admit it feels a little weird making this video. Because Lost Ark has been out for a few years in other regions, it's one of those games that already has videos on YouTube with titles like, I have 5,000 hours played, here's what you need to know. Or, I spent $30,000 in Lost Ark, ask me anything. I got a few serious questions for that guy, but that's another story. Point being, how do you make an impressions video or a review for a game that is already so well known and established elsewhere? Well, I can't know what I don't know, and I'm not going to pretend that I do. What I can do, though, is share with you my experience with the game so far, and just let you know what I think. Like a lot of you, I've been hearing about Lost Ark for some time. Since it first launched in Korea back in 2019, there's been quite a lot of buzz around this game. When I first looked into it, I thought, hey, this looks pretty cool, but I never pulled the trigger on trying it myself, because frankly, running VPNs to play games not available in my region is something I normally shy away from. However, after getting a taste of the game in the Western releases beta back in November, I knew that I had to play some more. I have since spent about 130 hours with Lost Ark, that time split between playing on Russian servers with a VPN, but also trying out this private test server for the Western release. After all of that time, I can confidently say I really like the game and I will be playing Lost Ark at launch. Although I do have some serious concerns around how I'll feel down the road, with this being a game where progression centers around farming materials to upgrade gear, and that upgrading process having progressively higher chances to fail, causing you to lose those materials and have to farm them over again. I simply don't enjoy that sort of structure and progression in an MMO. However, I know at the very least I will enjoy my time up until that point, as so far, 130 hours in, I'm still having a really good time. So let's dive in, take a closer look at what Lost Ark is, what the game's all about, the sort of things you'll be doing, and help you decide if this is a game that you might want to play. As with any MMO, our journey begins with leveling, and this is very straightforward in Lost Ark. After creating your character, you're taken on an incredibly linear path through the various leveling zones and regions. This isn't one of those go and level wherever or however you please kind of games. You must follow the main story quest, and that'll take you from the starting zone all the way to the first endgame region of Vern. And that is it. Every person that plays Lost Ark will take the exact same route to max level. Now, in addition to the main story, there are side quests and other activities, such as dungeons available in most every leveling zone, but all you technically need to do to reach the soft cap is the main story quest line. All of that other stuff is more or less bonus for currency, resources, and gear as you level. I do think, though, that for your first playthrough, it's worth doing much of this stuff. I would suggest trying to fully experience the game and the leveling process for your first time through, because the truth is, if you stick with Lost Ark, you will almost certainly be leveling other characters, at which point you're likely just gonna hammer through that level process to reach the end game as soon as possible. So for your very first playthrough, I suggest just enjoying it, do some side quests, especially the ones with the chain link, as they give nice rewards, and the purple quest, as they are meant to guide you through some of the various complicated systems and mechanics, unless you're looking to reach and start doing endgame stuff as soon as possible immediately after launch. Please just take your time and enjoy leveling, experience the zones, and especially check out some of those leveling dungeons. They're just so damn cool. I really had a good time with them, and the main story quest line only takes you to some of them, so jump in while you're leveling for the first time. That's my recommendation. Not only is this main story quest fairly straightforward, the zones themselves are also quite linear in structure. They are mostly just a series of wide interconnected pathways with towns, quest hubs, and those dungeons scattered throughout. They cover just about all of the typical fantasy settings you might expect. You'll go through forests, swamps, and mountains. Not to diminish these areas, as there are some really cool set pieces here and there, but just to say that while leveling, it's mostly just your run-of-the-mill high fantasy locations. Probably one of my favorite regions comes near the end of leveling to the soft cap process, and that's the region region of Argentine. This is like this desert, steampunk themed area with lots of large metallic structures and mechanical creatures, emphasis on technology. It was just really cool looking, and I enjoyed my time in this zone. I also really liked this zone that you're basically spending the whole time climbing this massive rock giant. I thought that was kind of cool. My very first time reaching and leveling to the soft cap of 50 took me about 25 hours. Keep in mind that this was me just learning the game and playing at a casual pace. I did a lot of side quests. I worked on my life skills with gathering and mining and stuff like that. I also spent a bunch of time on my private island, and like I mentioned and I suggested, I did a lot of the leveling dungeons. Now for my second character, I was more focused on reaching the end game, and that took me around 15 hours from 1 to 50, or I'm sorry, from 10 to 50, because this game starts off at level 10 because I don't know. And then on my third character, I went from 10 to 50 in about 12 hours. Now, as of this recording, I've done at least some end game with a berserker, a gun lancer, and a sorcerer, and I can almost certainly say that these will not be the only classes that I try, mainly because each of them have just felt so good and fun to play in their own way that I'm just super curious and interested in trying out some more of the classes. Which brings me to what is likely this game's biggest selling point. Combat feels amazing. Across the board, playing this game is very fun. This is one of the better feeling top-down action games that I've ever played, honestly. In fact, over these past few weeks, I have spent countless days not working on making YouTube videos like I intended to, just because I wanted to keep logging in and playing the game. It's that much fun, like to my own detriment. I know it's not healthy, but it's just what it is. Every time you go in and you blow up this massive group of enemies with some over-the-top attack or spell, everything about it is amazing. The animations, the effects, the particles, the sounds, it's just very satisfying playing this game, and that's why I literally can't stop. And while exploding hordes of enemies is fun, that's not all the game's combat centers around. It also can be quite particular. Some of the content that I've enjoyed the most has been the Guardian raids. These are Monster Hunter style fights where you enter a small area and then you must locate and fight a big boss. Now, each one of these bosses are unique. They'll have their own set of attack patterns and phases. And just like Monster Hunter, learning their moves becomes a vital part of the process. It is important to make sure you avoid their attacks and maximize your damage. And just going through that learning process, going through that trial and error until you eventually master the encounter and are able to see and avoid like every one of their attacks. Similarly to how just playing the game is satisfying, this learning process and this getting better and improving process is very satisfying. Both types of content, mindlessly obliterating waves of enemies or tactically maneuvering around, outplaying these dangerous bosses, all of it's just really enjoyable. And this is without me even seeing any of the larger scale endgame group activities, which I've heard require extreme coordination and communication to pull off. And this sounds amazing. I'm really looking forward to checking out this harder endgame group stuff post-launch. I've also heard nothing but great things about the game's PvP, and I'm really excited to jump in and give that a look too. Somehow in my 130 hours, I still haven't done PvP, but honestly, mainly that's because I've just been so engaged with everything else that this game has to offer. And what exactly is that? Like, what sort of stuff will you be doing in Lost Ark? Well, after going through the main story quest, leveling up and reaching that soft cap of 50, you're then introduced to the first tier of endgame activities. You unlock these upon arrival in Vern Castle, and they consist of a handful of repeatable type of daily and weekly content, chaos dungeons, guardian raids, and abyssal dungeons. These three are the main drivers and what you'll be starting out with in your endgame gear and power progression. Chaos dungeons take you through 3 separate stages where you'll fight back hordes of enemies. These are set in a variety of different locations with different enemy types, but it's more or less all the same thing. Enemies spawn in, you blow them up, and then you have to just beat this 5-minute timer on each stage to progress to the next. It's all pretty easy to do. The timer seems more like a formality than anything else. I've never not cleared a stage in under 5 minutes. The first stage is always in a relatively small room, and there'll just be wave after wave of basic enemies spawning in around you. You kill enough of them, and then a portal opens to stage 2. Stage 2 is in a somewhat larger area than the first stage. You'll have those same basic hordes of enemies, along with some larger and tough elite enemies. Once you clear enough of those elites, eventually a boss will spawn whom you have to eliminate, and then a portal opens to stage 3. And stage 3 is more of the same, clear hordes of basic enemies. Then the shard appears, you break the shard, kill an elite, rinse and repeat until you fill this resource meter up to 100%, and then the Chaos Dungeon ends and you collect your reward. Now, occasionally during this process, moving through the 3 stages of a Chaos Dungeon, you'll get lucky and have this unique gold portal. This takes you to a small room with a special boss in it that can drop some highly valuable stuff like more upgrade materials and gold. As far as I've seen and what I've read, this just appears to happen randomly from time to time, but it's nice when it does. Chaos Dungeons are essentially your starting point in the gearing up process, as these will drop the base level gear that you'll be using in endgame. On top of that, they also drop the resources needed to upgrade that gear, as well as accessories and some other useful stuff, which is pretty much the case for the rest of the endgame PvE activities. All of it drops various types of things, materials, currencies, gear that you'll need and use as you progress through the game. On average, Chaos Dungeons take roughly 5 to 10 minutes to finish. You will want to do them twice daily, as that is the number of times you can run to collect the main source of those items that you're looking for. However, they can be run additional times, at which point you will collect these alternative currencies that can be used at a nearby vendor to get more items and resources. You're able to run these solo or in a group, and in general, will want to do it at the highest level you've unlocked and can complete, as the rewards get progressively better. So when you first reach level 50 endgame, you'll have access to North Vern level 1. You run it, get gear, upgrade that gear, that raises your item level, unlocking the higher tiers that drop better gear, so on and so on. But we'll touch on how this gear progression works in a little more detail later on. While we can consider Chaos Dungeons your starting point, it's pretty simple and I would say far from engaging content. However, another major daily activity that you'll be doing are the Guardian raids, and as I mentioned earlier, I've really enjoyed these. Again, these are very similar to Monster Hunter battles in a lot of ways. You're dropped in on a map, you search the various areas looking for a boss, or there's also an item called a flare that you can use to temporarily see the boss location, and then once you find and get to the boss, you and your team try to take them out before a timer expires. And this is just a big old traditional boss fight. Every boss has its own set of large telegraphed attacks with unique patterns, areas, effects, and debuffs. They'll even go through various phases, getting tougher as they do. Periodically as well, the boss will run away, forcing you to find their location on the map once more. And just the whole thing is this big learning process that I found quite enjoyable. The ultimate goal is eventually you learn each of these bosses' telegraphs so that you know what's coming, how to position, and when to dodge. Especially since getting hit by certain attacks could incapacitate your character for some time, which may open you up to taking tons of damage, which as you assume you don't want to happen. The early ones will be fairly simple, but these fights can get quite tough and are made even harder by the fact that they have these set of restrictions. Guardian runs limit the number of times your team can revive, along with the number of consumables and ultimate charges you have access to. So this forces you and your team to try your best to be careful, avoid damage, not die, and then use your ultimates at the proper time so as not to be interrupted by the boss. Not too long ago, I did a run that came all the way down to the wire. All of my team revives were used up, I was the last person standing, and I didn't have any health potion charges remaining, so the success of the run was entirely on my shoulders, not an ideal position for the rest of my team. I gotta say, it was some pressure, but it was a lot of fun, and fortunately, I had my ultimate available and took care of business. Now, like the Chaos Dungeons, Guardian raids should be done twice every day. They'll reward you with accessories and other useful items like gems, cards, books, and runes. One of the most important things that you get from them, though, are upgrade materials that are not character bound, meaning you can send them to another one of your characters to fuel their gearing process, or you can sell them for gold, which is primarily what makes doing these runs so valuable. The next activity that will be in your regular endgame PvE rotation are abyssal dungeons. These are just harder versions of the types of dungeons you come across while leveling up. Now, like a traditional MMO dungeon, you'll move through various areas, clearing trash, fighting mini bosses, and eventually you'll take on a big tough boss at the very end. These reward accessories, books, currencies, and skill runes, which are neat forms of additional character power. You can do each abyssal dungeon a few times a week for these rewards, and you should do them. For each of the endgame activities I mentioned so far, the Chaos Dungeon, Guardian Raid, Void Dungeons, you're doing this to collect the gear, accessories, currencies, materials, and a bunch of other useful items for character and account progression. Also, for each of these, as you progress your item level, you'll unlock access to higher challenge tiers within each tier that give better rewards. Now, those are the three main types of repeat repeatable endgame content, but there's more than that. There's the tower, which is a solo challenge activity where you have to climb the floors of a tower. This gets progressively harder and grants better rewards the further you go. So you start off on floor 1, are given an objective, which is normally just kill a group of enemies or kill a boss. And then if you complete that within a set time limit, you collect the reward and can move on to the next floor. It's a pretty straightforward process. There are a few things of note here though. The climb is tiered and locked behind an item level requirement. So basically there's a set item level you need to start, and then at floor 5, a new item level that you have to have in order to continue goes on for every 5 floors. There's a new item level you have to reach before you can do it. The tower rewards various upgrade materials and currencies. One of the more valuable things you can get though is the skill points potion, which as the name implies, grants you more points to spend powering up your skills. The cool thing about these is that they're account bound, so if you collect a bunch of skill point potions from doing the tower and other stuff, when you make a brand new character, you'll have all those bonus skill points available to spend right away. Getting skill point potions and unlocking more points to spend in your skills, making them stronger, is a pretty big deal when it comes to character and account progression in this game. But wait, there's more. Other endgame PvE content comes in the form of world events, ticketed events, and daily quests. World events include things like chaos gates, field bosses, which are just open world boss fights. There are adventure islands, ghost ships, and a variety of other stuff that becomes periodically available throughout the course of every day. There's an in-game tracker that will show you what events are currently active as well as what's coming up. It'll tell you where the events are located and what rewards they give. So depending on what resources or currencies you're after at any given time, this will inform what world events you want to go out and participate in. There are also ticketed activities like the cube, boss runs, or platinum fields. You'll get these tickets doing other stuff, and then you'll use those tickets to do these activities, which gives you more stuff. There are also daily and weekly quests available to do. These will give you basic tasks that take you to various islands or continents and will have rewards with stuff that you want. That's some of the stuff that you'll actually be doing, but I want to talk a little bit about how the way gear progression works in this game. How you're making your character more powerful to get to those higher tiers of content. Everything we've talked about so far in one way or another will feed into your endgame gear and power progression. At the most basic level, it works like this. You start out running Chaos Dungeons to get a base set of gear, which includes various armor pieces and a weapon. In addition to that gear, you'll collect upgrade materials doing Chaos Dungeons, Guardian Raids, and some of the other endgame activities. Then you will take that gear that you get, as well as the materials, go to the gear honing vendor in any major city's crafting district, where you will use the materials along with some currency to hone and upgrade your gear from its base to +1. This in turn raises your item and your power level, at which point your character is now stronger and you can go back to running Chaos Dungeons, doing Guardian Raids, and other stuff for more gear and more materials. You then go back to the vendor, upgrade each gear piece now to +2, you're now stronger, you go back and farm more gear and materials, so on and so on. This process continues until your item level reaches a point where you unlock a new end game zone as well as the next tier of activities. So you'll start out with access to tier 1 level 1 Chaos Dungeons, Guardian Raids, and Abyssal Dungeons. Then you level up your stuff through the process we mentioned until you eventually go through each of the levels of tier 1 and get to an item level that unlocks tier 2, giving you access to that next end game zone as well as the next tier of activities. You continue to farm and upgrade gear, getting materials, raising your item level through the various levels of tier 2 until you hit the threshold that gives you access to tier 3. And this, at the most basic level, is how you progress your character in Lost Ark. Now, there are many further nuances, like the fact that gear also has a quality level, so along the way you'll be keeping an eye out for higher quality pieces and then feeding your existing gear into that gear. Then there's also the fact that gear and item level isn't the only form of progression in this game. There are various types of account progression, like zone completion, where you can unlock stat boost for all your characters. There's an NPC rapport system where you will feed them and do things for them to raise your reputation, giving you more stuff. There's also a card system, which gives you nice boost and bonuses. There are tripods and engravings. This game just has a whole lot of stuff to work towards on an individual character level, but also across your entire account. And this isn't even touching on some of the other things to do, like sailing, which you unlock around level 35, that lets you travel to the different continents, but also to islands that have their own quest chains and things for you to unlock. Some daily quests happen here as well. There's also the stronghold or the estate, which is your instance player housing. You can customize this and decorate it, but also it serves a functional purpose, unlocking various other upgrades and progression, like crafting items, making potions, bombs, grenades, and other useful items. There's also the whole other system of PvP, which I myself have yet to experience after 130 hours. I know it's kind of crazy, but like I've touched on, there's a lot of stuff going on in this game. And there are also harder and higher tier PvE group content like Legion raids, which I have yet to see as well, which look and sound really cool. There's just a lot of stuff in this game, and a lot of it is really fun, interesting, engaging. The game is fun to play. There's a lot to keep you busy. You're not gonna lack for stuff to do if you decide to play Lost Ark. But there's a big aspect that I do want to touch on, and that is the game's monetization. You probably already know that Lost Ark is a free-to-play game, and as such, there are numerous ways they let you spend money. Some of this is fairly benign and just cosmetic. You can purchase outfits and such, but others are tied directly to character power. Now, I haven't played for long enough or gotten deep enough into the game to fully understand every aspect of the monetization system, but I know enough to say this: the game lets you trade money for power, or it lets you skip. To put it simply, Lost Ark lets you spend real money to purchase the materials needed for upgrading your gear. As we touched on earlier, you will farm materials and currency and then use those to raise your item level. What you have to realize though is that the further you progress down this path, the higher the chance these upgrades have to fail. This is basically meant as a currency, resource, and in turn, a time sink. You will farm, feed your gear, click upgrade, and it can fail. And if it does, you will lose those materials and currencies that you spent on it, at which point you can either go out and farm some more on your main, or if you're capped on daily rewards, do this on an alt, or you can just spend real money to bypass part of that grind and save yourself some time. For a lot of people, this right here is going to be a deal breaker. Knowing that down the road they'll come up against this system will likely stop some people from even trying the game. On a personal level, I really dislike this, but it's not enough to stop me from experiencing the rest of Lost Ark. As I said earlier, I've spent 130 hours, have had a blast, and I still want to keep playing. I'm doing so though, knowing full well that at some point, this gear upgrade process will most certainly become frustrating and I will likely want to stop. And that's okay. For me, that's okay. When I hit that wall, it's just my cue to move on and play another game, and I am far from lacking in games that I'm wanting to play. There's just too many and not enough time. But if you're someone who is more inclined to stick with a single game for many months or years at a time, and I know many fans of MMOs, that's exactly what they're looking for, this could be a deal breaker for you. There are systems in place to help alleviate the process, like the fact that the more times you fail, the better chance you have of success. But at its core, the system does work in a way to try to nudge you in the direction of spending a lot more time playing and grinding, farming for stuff, or maybe just spending a little bit of extra cash. That's just how free-to-play games make their way, really. That's how they make their money. They give you that little nudge and say, hey, this would be a little easier if you spent a little dough. And I don't love engaging with that system. And when I hit that, yeah, I will probably move on. But let me just wrap up with saying this. Not every game has me itching for more after sinking over 100 hours, but at least for now, Lost Ark is one of those games. I have loved pretty much every minute of my experience thus far, and I am really excited to dive deeper and play a whole lot more. I'm excited for launch day, I'm excited to grind, reach the end game, start gearing up, and running that difficult content with my friends. I'm excited to finally dip my toes into the PvP. I have a feeling from what I've seen that I will really enjoy this, and I'm excited for all the content that I've yet to see. The additional endgame zones, everything beyond tier 3, especially those Legion raids, which we'll be getting a taste of shortly after launch. While I think Lost Ark is a pretty great game, I'm also confident it won't be for everyone. Some people just won't like the top-down camera perspective. Some people don't care for this ARPG style combat, and many people will hate how the endgame progression, leveling gear, and the failing system works. But for me, as a free game that I've already played quite a bit of, enough. I am confident I still have hundreds more hours ahead of me. And at this point, I'm looking forward to it. And with that, we will wrap up this video of should you play Lost Ark. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it and hope it was informative and or helpful to your decision as to whether or not this might be a game for you. As always, thanks for watching. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.